Lyra then ran along the jagged ridge of Talon 3, her boots kicking up red dust that smelled of metal and ozone. The sky was fractured, streaked with green lightning from the magnetic storms that raged across the horizon. Every few seconds, a pulse of electricity tore through the air, and she had to duck behind a crumbling rock to avoid being struck. The planet was alive with danger, but Lyra did not hesitate. Survival was not about fear, it was about action. At 14 she had already seen more death than most adults. The orbital city of Haven 7 had taught her that the universe did not give second chances. Her father had been lost to a scavenger raid years ago, leaving her with a sharp mind and a stubborn will. She had learned to fix anything from damaged drones to failing exosuits, and now her skill was the only thing keeping her alive. Her mission today was simple in theory: scavenge enough power cells to repair a transport drone. But the crater she stumbled upon made everything more complicated. Smoke curled from a deep hole in the ground, and inside, barely visible, was the creature that would change everything. A hatchling, small but terrifying, lay on its side. Its scales were blackened and cracked, and it twitched weakly as sparks jumped from its wings. Lyra froze, heart pounding. She had read about dragons in old human archives, but none of that prepared her for the smell of scorched scales or the sound of intelligent fear. The hatchling looked at her with wide amber eyes. Its pupils were vertical, sharp, calculating, like it understood that she could help or harm it. Lyra's first instinct was to step back. Most humans would have run. Any adult explorer would have reported it and left. But something inside her refused. The hatchling was alone, injured, and terrified. She could not leave it to die. Not when she had the knowledge and tools to try to help. Slowly she crouched, keeping her hands visible. The hatchling hissed and flinched, sparks dancing across its broken wings. She held out a small medical injector, one she had cobbled together from scavenged nanomaterials. Its tiny pulse was uneven, but it was still alive. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," she whispered, though the words felt small against the roar of the storms. The hatchling's eyes narrowed. His body shivered. Lyra inched closer, every movement measured. One wrong motion could trigger a strike of fire, or a bite powerful enough to crush her bones. Yet she persisted, using the knowledge she had gleaned from studying xenobiology. The creature's fear was obvious, but curiosity flickered behind its caution. She administered the first dose of nano-repair serum. The hatchling squealed, jerking violently, and Lyra barely caught it before it slammed against the crater wall. Sparks flew from her exosuit, and she cursed under her breath. The serum stabilized some of the wing tissue, but not enough. The creature's wings were nearly destroyed. Flying would be impossible for months, if not longer. Lyra glanced around, weighing her options. The storms made any movement across the crater risky. The planet's scavenger drones, metallic, insect-like machines designed to harvest alien life, buzzed in the distance, drawn by the heat and motion. She could see them, their glowing red sensors scanning, waiting for a target. If they found the hatchling, it would be shredded in seconds. Her mind raced. The cliff above the crater might offer a safe path, but it was unstable. Rocks tumbled down with every step, and a miscalculation could send both of them plummeting into the jagged rocks below. Still, leaving the hatchling here was not an option. Humans had survived worse odds before. Humans had always found a way. "Hold on," she said to the creature, her voice steady despite the storm. She lifted it carefully, feeling its tiny claws dig into her gloves. Sparks flared from its damaged wings, and it let out a small roar, not aggressive but terrified. Lyra's stomach tightened. This was no ordinary rescue. She was holding a life at the edge of extinction, a creature that could kill her in a heartbeat if it panicked. She began climbing, slow and deliberate, testing each foothold. The hatchling hissed, and she had to talk to it continuously, murmuring encouragements, keeping its fear from turning into panic. The drones began to approach, their buzzing growing louder over the storm. Every second counted. Lyra reached a jagged ledge, her arms trembling from strain and adrenaline. Below, the crater seemed endless, smoke curling around sharp rocks like fingers reaching for them. The hatchling pressed against her chest, exhausted but alive. She looked up at the cliff above. Another surge of lightning illuminated a safer path, but it was narrow, precarious, and would require every ounce of her balance and intellect. She took a deep breath. She had no choice but to climb. Not just for herself, but for this small, broken creature that had somehow trusted her. The first step onto the ledge was shaky but steady. Sparks from the hatchling's wings flickered, illuminating her path. Behind them, the scavenger drones began to descend toward the crater. Lyra's mind worked furiously, calculating angles, weight distribution, and the next safe step. One misstep, one miscalculation, and both of them could die. But the storm had not broken her, and fear had not frozen her. Humans had survived far worse. Humans had always survived. She whispered again to the hatchling, "We're almost there. Just a little further." Its amber eyes blinked slowly as if acknowledging her words. She could feel its trust growing, fragile but real. A sudden boom of lightning struck the ledge ahead, cracking a section of rock. Lyra froze mid-step, heart hammering. The path was breaking apart under her feet, the storm tearing at her balance, and the scavenger drones were closer than ever. She clenched her teeth, gripping the hatchling tighter. The next move would decide everything. Lyra's boots scraped against the crumbling ledge as she froze, heart hammering in her chest. The lightning had split the cliff just ahead, and the hatchling trembled in her arms, sparks flickering from its broken wings. Below, the scavenger drones swarmed, metallic shadows against the red dust, scanning for any movement. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to run. The only way forward was across a path that seemed ready to collapse with the slightest touch. She adjusted the hatchling in her arms, whispering soothing words, trying to keep it calm. "I've got you. Just a little further." Its eyes, wide and intelligent, tracked hers, flickering with both fear and trust. That trust made her chest tighten. Humans had always survived by taking risks, by thinking faster than their enemies, by refusing to give up when the odds were impossible. This was one of those moments. Her mind raced. The ledge ahead was unstable, but a series of small footholds along the cliff's edge might work. Each step required precision. One slip and both would fall into the crater below. The drones were rising closer, their red sensors locking on. Lyra could almost hear the whirring of their cutting blades. She placed her boot carefully, testing the rock. It held. Relief surged briefly before the hatchling yipped and sparks jumped from its wings. A small tremor ran through the cliff. Magnetic storms caused the rocks to vibrate violently, and the hatchling flailed. Lyra reacted instantly, gripping it tighter, shifting her weight to compensate. One wrong move and it would plummet. Below, one drone broke from the group and surged upward, drawn by the hatchling's heat. Lyra's pulse raced. She had no weapons, no conventional tools to fight them off. All she had was her mind and the small med-injector kit in her belt. She could use the serum to calm the hatchling, but it wouldn't stop the drones from attacking. She had to think fast. Her eyes scanned the cliffside. A jagged overhang jutted out ahead, barely visible under the stormlit sky. If she could reach it, it would give temporary cover. But the jump was risky. She weighed her options in a fraction of a second. Humans survived by acting decisively when danger left no room for hesitation. "Hold on," she shouted, pressing the hatchling to her chest as she jumped. The wind ripped at her hair, and the hatchling squealed in fear. Her feet hit the overhang, barely catching on the edges. She grabbed a rock for support, and for a moment the world felt like it tilted. Sparks from the hatchling's wings illuminated the storm, turning the cliffside into a theater of danger. The drones followed, diving with speed and precision. Lyra didn't have time to think about fear. She needed a plan. Her eyes landed on a pile of magnetic debris, scrap metal left from previous storms. If she could destabilize it, perhaps she could create a barrier between them and the drones. Quickly, she dropped the hatchling onto the overhang and started pulling pieces of debris, stacking them precariously. The hatchling whimpered, nudging at her hands. I know, just a little patience," she murmured. With one final push, the debris shifted, tumbling down the cliff. The drones swerved to avoid it, some hitting rocks and spinning out of control. Lyra scooped up the hatchling again, her arms trembling from exertion. The drones regrouped, buzzing closer, but the storm and uneven terrain slowed them. Her heart pounded, every nerve on edge. She had kept the hatchling alive this far, but there was no guarantee the next step would work. Humans were exceptional because they adapted. That adaptability was the only thing standing between life and death right now. Ahead, she spotted a narrow ridge leading toward a safer section of the cliff. It was thin, barely wider than her boots, and the wind screamed around her. One slip and both would be lost. She inhaled deeply, focusing every ounce of her body and mind. Humans had always faced impossible odds and pushed forward anyway. She would not fail. She began moving across the ridge, each step slow but deliberate. The hatchling's wings brushed against her suit as it struggled to keep balance, sparks flicking from its damaged tips. Below, the drones began to climb again, sensing the movement. Lyra quickened her pace, glancing back. One drone surged, sensors glowing red, and she realized it could reach them in seconds. Instinct took over. She extended her arm and tapped the hatchling's chest with a small device she had built for monitoring alien lifeforms. It emitted a faint pulse, harmless but startling. The hatchling's wings twitched, responding to the vibration. The drone hesitated, its programming unsure how to interpret this new signal. Lyra gritted her teeth. Humans survived because they could improvise, turning the smallest advantage into survival. The ridge ended at a jagged rock formation that formed a natural alcove. She made a final leap, landing hard but safe. The hatchling clung to her, exhausted and sparking faintly. The drone circled below, frustrated, but temporarily blocked by the cliffs. Lyra sank to her knees, letting the hatchling rest on her chest. Her breaths came fast, but her mind raced ahead. The storm was still raging, the drones were still hunting, and they were far from safety. But for the first time, the hatchling looked at her not with terror, but with a flicker of trust. That small spark was all she needed. She whispered almost to herself, "We're not done yet. We'll make it. Somehow." The wind howled, the lightning cracked, and the drones began regrouping. Ahead, the cliffs stretched higher, more unstable and dangerous than ever. Lyra glanced at the hatchling, feeling its warmth against her chest, and steeled herself. Every step from here would demand courage, speed, and intellect, the hallmarks of humanity at its finest. And as the first surge of drones began to scale the cliff toward them, Lyra realized the next move could either save them both, or end everything. Lyra's heart hammered as the scavenger drones began to climb the cliff. Their metallic legs clicked and scraped against the rocks, red sensors scanning for any sign of movement. Below, the crater's smoke swirled like a warning, but there was no time to hesitate. The hatchling pressed against her chest, small claws digging into her gloves, sparks flicking from its broken wings. Every second counted. If the drones reached them, both would be destroyed in moments. She glanced around the ledge. The overhang above offered some cover, but it was narrow and unstable. The wind ripped at her hair, tugging at her exosuit, making balance almost impossible. Humans survived impossible odds because they could think faster than their enemies, see solutions where others saw only danger. Lyra's mind raced. She had to act, fast and decisively. Her eyes landed on a pile of old drone scraps nearby, left behind from storms that had ripped apart scavenger patrols before. She had no weapon, no explosives, but she had her ingenuity. The pieces of metal, wires, and magnetic coils could be used to create a makeshift diversion, or maybe even a trap. "Stay calm," she whispered to the hatchling. "I have an idea, but you need to trust me." The creature blinked, sparks flicking from its wings in nervous energy. It had already survived this far because of her quick thinking. Now it had to keep trusting her. Lyra began assembling the scrap quickly. She connected coils to her exosuit's power regulator, creating a small magnetic pulse generator. Her hands shook from exertion, the hatchling clinging tightly, but she worked with precision. One wrong connection could overload the device, or worse, harm the hatchling. She finished the setup just as the first drone's claw scraped dangerously close to the ledge. She activated the device. A pulse of magnetism surged outward, sending metallic debris from the cliff tumbling downward in a controlled avalanche. The drones swerved, their red sensors confused by the sudden surge of energy and falling rocks. Some were knocked aside entirely, crashing into jagged rocks below. Lyra didn't wait. She scooped up the hatchling, careful to keep its wings from sparking uncontrollably, and sprinted toward the next ledge. The wind screamed in her ears, and the storm made visibility nearly impossible. Lightning flashed, illuminating the alien landscape, the jagged cliffs, and the drone still recovering from her trap. She had to calculate every step. One slip, one misstep, and the cliff would claim them both. Humans survived by improvising, but survival also demanded courage, and courage was what Lyra had in abundance. Ahead, she spotted a narrow chasm bridging two cliffs. The distance was too wide to jump safely, but she had an idea. Using her knowledge of magnetic fields, she adjusted her device to create a temporary repulsion field. The hatchling reacted immediately, wings twitching. She spoke to it in quick, soothing tones, guiding it to hover slightly above her chest. Sparks flickered, but the device held it steady. Lyra ran, launching herself across the chasm while the hatchling hovered beside her. The wind tried to rip them apart, but her pulse calculations were precise. They landed hard on the opposite cliff, rolling to absorb the impact. Behind them, a drone surged forward, faster than the others. Lyra froze for a fraction of a second, then acted. She pointed her device at the drone, sending a concentrated magnetic pulse that tore through its circuits. Sparks flew and the machine collapsed in a heap. The The hatchling looked at her with wide amber eyes. It had never seen anything like this. Fear and admiration mixed in its gaze, and Lyra felt a strange warmth. She had saved it again, not just with strength or courage but with human ingenuity. Every calculation, every improvised tool had turned a near-certain death into a victory. But there was no time to celebrate. The other drones were regrouping and the cliff ahead narrowed into a sheer wall. Her mind raced. Humans survived by adapting, by seeing solutions others could not. She remembered the wind tunnels near the overhangs, turbulent air pockets that could lift even a weak dragon hatchling. If she could get the hatchling into one of those currents, it might gain enough lift to escape the cliff entirely. She adjusted the exosuit stabilizers, whispering instructions to the hatchling. Sparks flickered from its wings as it tried to follow her guidance. She calculated the wind speed, the angle of the current, and the hatchling's weight, then gave the signal. With a small leap in the hatchling's struggling wings, they caught the turbulent air. Lyra held on tightly as the hatchling lifted higher, the cliff walls dropping beneath them, drones still flailing below. For a moment, everything seemed impossible, suspended between disaster and triumph. The hatchling began to stabilize, wings pumping weakly but effectively, rising higher with each beat. Lyra's heart pounded, not with fear but with exhilaration. Humans survived because they refused to accept the impossible. Then lightning struck nearby, sending a shockwave through the air. Lyra and the hatchling were thrown off balance. Sparks flew uncontrollably from the creature's wings and her grip slipped. Time slowed. She could not let go, not now, not after everything. Instinct took over. She wrapped her arms tighter around the hatchling, adjusting the pulse generator to stabilize the magnetic field. The creature responded immediately, wings flaring and holding them steady. Above them, the storm twisted violently, but the makeshift lift held. They were rising, away from the cliff, away from the drones. Lyra looked down briefly, seeing the chaos below, and then up at the hatchling. It met her gaze, trust shining through its fear, and she knew they were no longer just surviving. They were winning. Still, they were not safe. The cliffs were only the first obstacle. Talon 3's storms stretched far beyond, and the orbital city of Haven 7 was miles away, across terrain no human or dragon had traversed together. Lyra took a deep breath, whispering to the hatchling, "We're not done yet. Hold on tight. The real challenge is just ahead." The hatchling flared its wings again, sparks illuminating its amber eyes. Together they rose into the storm, the drones floundering below, and Lyra knew that the next move would demand every ounce of courage, intellect, and determination she had. Humanity had survived worse odds. Humanity would survive this. Lyra's breath came in ragged gasps as she and the hatchling rose through the violent winds of Talon 3's storm. Sparks flickered from its damaged wings, tiny bursts of light that cut through the dark, green-lit clouds. The drones below swarmed in confusion, flailing against the turbulence, but Lyra knew it was only a matter of time before more of them regrouped. She had to reach Haven 7's orbital sector quickly, or risk being trapped in this planet's death grip forever. The hatchling clung to her chest, its small claws digging into her exosuit. Its faint hiss of panic mixed with weak sparks, a reminder of how fragile life could be. Humans had survived countless dangers because they refused to give up when others would surrender. Lyra's mind raced, calculating each movement, each angle of the storm, and each pulse of the hatchling's flaring wings. One miscalculation and they could tumble into the craggy cliffs below. Ahead, she could see the jagged outline of Haven 7's orbital spires, tiny beacons of human civilization in the chaos. But getting there would not be simple. The wind currents twisted unpredictably and scavenger drones, some new, larger than before, were converging fast. Their red sensors glowed like angry eyes, scanning for the hatchling's heat signature. Lyra had no weapons, no reinforcements, only her ingenuity. She scanned her suit's controls and the small med-injector kit strapped to her belt. The hatchling's wings were healing slowly, but she could stabilize them further with nano-repair patches she'd crafted from scavenged tech. She carefully pulled one from the kit, applying the serum along the fractured membranes. Sparks hissed, but the wings stiffened, holding the hatchling more securely. It chirped faintly, a sound of relief, and Lyra felt a surge of hope. The drones were close now, moving faster than ever. One surged ahead, a predator built for efficiency, its claws scraping dangerously close to her as she navigated the winds. Humans survived by thinking faster than their enemies, by improvising tools from scraps, and by using courage as a weapon. Lyra reached into her pack and activated the pulse generator she had used earlier, adjusting the magnetic field to create a controlled repulsion. A burst of energy flared, knocking the lead drone off balance. Sparks flew as it collided with the cliffside, shattering its sensors. Behind them, the other drones hesitated, unsure how to respond. That moment was all Lyra needed. She tilted her body, letting the hatchling catch a strong wind pocket. Its wings flared fully, glowing faintly as the serum stabilized them, and together they shot upward, weaving through the storm with a combination of instinct and precise calculations. The hatchling responded to her voice and small gestures, following her lead with tentative trust. Humans survived because they adapted, and together they were improvising a flight no one had ever attempted. Reaching Haven 7's outer orbital platforms, she could see alarms flashing across the city. Sensors detected the unusual energy readings from the hatchling. Officials would try to contain it, possibly shoot it down, fearing contamination or aggression. Lyra gritted her teeth. No one could stop them. She refused to let bureaucracy or fear take what she had saved. The hatchling had already survived impossible odds, and she would not betray that trust now. She guided the hatchling through narrow gaps between spires, sparks flying off its wings with every adjustment. Below, smaller drones attempted to intercept, but the narrow passages made them crash repeatedly. Lyra's mind worked frantically, anticipating each obstacle, adjusting the hatchling's wings, and manipulating her exosuit stabilizers to steer them both safely. Humans survived because they used intelligence, courage, and relentless determination. Lyra embodied all three. Suddenly, a larger drone, heavier and faster, surged toward them from the orbital rim. Its sensors locked onto the hatchling's wings. Lyra had mere seconds. She glanced around and saw the city's magnetic shield grids. If she could guide the hatchling through a narrow gap in the shielding, the drone would slam into the barrier and disable itself. "Trust me," she whispered. The hatchling flared its wings, catching the wind perfectly as she guided it toward the grid. The drone charged, sensors glowing red, and collided with the barrier in a shower of sparks. The rest of the swarm scattered, disoriented and delayed. Lyra exhaled, feeling the rush of adrenaline. They had made it past the immediate threat, but Haven 7 was still not fully safe. The hatchling's wings began to glow stronger, responding to the serum and her careful guidance. It chirped softly, no longer frightened but alert, intelligent, and ready. Lyra's heart swelled, not just with relief but with pride. Humans survived because they could push beyond fear, beyond danger, and beyond what anyone thought possible. She had proven it here in the storm, carrying life itself across impossible odds. Above, the orbital city sensors finally locked onto them, and a human crew began to move in, curious and cautious. Lyra prepared to signal them, knowing she would have to prove trust once more. But before she could, the hatchling flared its wings and lifted higher, spinning gracefully through the turbulent currents. Sparks illuminated the sky, and Lyra laughed, a mixture of relief and exhilaration. She whispered again, "Almost there. Just a little further." Humans survived because they refused to quit, because they could think and act when all seemed lost, and because courage carried them through storms. The hatchling had survived because of that courage, and because of her. The storm began to ease slightly, the wind currents stabilizing as they approached the orbital platforms. The next challenge would not be the drones or the wind, it would be landing safely among humans who might not understand, who might fear what she had saved. Lyra tightened her grip on the hatchling. Every ounce of her mind, every spark of courage would be needed for the final move. Humanity had survived worse and together they would survive this. But the hatchling's small intelligent eyes flicked to her as if warning her, this was only the beginning. Something waited on Haven 7 that could change everything. The orbital city of Haven 7 glimmered ahead like a network of silver veins suspended in the void. Lyra's heart raced as she guided the hatchling through the final turbulence of Talon 3's storms. Its wings, now stabilized by the nano-repair serum and her careful guidance, flared fully with iridescent light. Sparks danced across them, small bursts of energy that painted the storm clouds above in shifting gold and crimson. The hatchling had survived the cliff, the drones, the magnetic storms, but now it faced humanity itself. Lyra tightened her grip, whispering, "Almost there. Stay calm." The hatchling chirped softly, leaning into her chest. Its amber eyes, wide, intelligent, and trusting, tracked hers. This was no longer just survival. This was a test of courage, morality, and ingenuity. Humans had survived impossible odds for centuries, not by brute force, but by daring to act when others hesitated. The orbital sensors were alive with alerts. The hatchling's energy signature registered as anomalous, and automated defenses prepared to intercept. Military drones swarmed in formation, weapons at the ready, scanning for threats. Lyra could feel the hatchling tense beneath her. She had to act fast. Using the pulse generator she had improvised on the cliff, she amplified a controlled magnetic field. The field nudged the hatchling upward, helping it glide smoothly while confusing the automated targeting systems. The lead military drones faltered, unable to lock onto a moving energy field, and the rest hesitated behind them. Lyra exhaled sharply, sweat running down her face inside the exosuit helmet. She had engineered one final advantage from scraps, calculations, and courage alone. As they approached the main orbital platform, a human patrol emerged, weapons raised, shouting commands over the comms. Lyra raised a hand to signal surrender, but she knew she couldn't let anyone take the hatchling by force. She needed the humans to see what she had already accomplished. She activated a small drone from her pack, sending it ahead to broadcast live visuals of the hatchling hovering above her chest, wings glowing, sparks flicking in perfect synchrony. The patrol stopped, astonished. A creature thought broken, alone, and dangerous now flew steadily, guided by the instincts of a human who refused to give up. The hatchling's eyes scanned the patrol, intelligent and alert, and Lyra saw recognition in them, a spark of understanding that humans could be allies, not predators. She carefully maneuvered onto a platform, using the wind currents to cushion their descent. The hatchling flared its wings, adjusting midair, and touched down gracefully. Lyra followed, knees shaking from exhaustion, heart racing with a mix of fear and triumph. The hatchling pressed against her chest, breathing heavy but steady. She had done it. Against impossible odds, she had brought it here alive. The humans around them lowered their weapons, awe overtaking caution. One of the officers, an older engineer named Roland Vey, approached slowly. By all protocols, this creature should have been neutralized. Yet here it is, unharmed. His eyes widened as he observed the subtle sparking from the wings and the way it responded to Lyra's movements. And you made this happen? Lyra nodded, voice steady despite exhaustion. It was alive. Alone. Injured. I didn't have the right to let it die. Humans survive because we try, because we act, because we believe we can do what others say is impossible. Roland studied the hatchling, then Lyra, then back at the creature. Slowly he nodded. I see now. Humanity isn't just surviving, we're shaping life itself across the stars. His words sank in. Lyra felt a swell of pride, not arrogance, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had honored the very best of human spirit, courage, intelligence, and morality. The hatchling chirped, nudging Lyra's cheek with its small, warm snout. It had trusted her completely, and that trust had carried them through storms, cliffs, and enemy drones. Humans survived, yes, but they also inspired hope in those who seemed beyond saving. This small, broken dragon now had a chance at life because one human refused to quit. Weeks passed as the hatchling's wings fully healed under careful monitoring. Lyra worked tirelessly, teaching it to respond to subtle commands, guiding its flight with patience and care. The city watched, amazed, as a creature thought impossible to save began to soar with strength and intelligence. News of Lyra's actions spread through Haven 7, sparking hope across the colonies. Humans were no longer merely survivors, they were protectors, innovators, and heroes. One evening, as the twin suns of Talon 3 dipped below the horizon, Lyra climbed onto the hatchling's back. Its wings stretched wide, catching the gentle currents above the orbital city. She whispered to it, "Let's show them what humans can do together with those who need us." With a mighty push, the hatchling lifted, soaring higher than the spires, twisting and banking through the skies with Lyra steady on its back. Sparks traced elegant arcs in the dim light, a living testament to survival and courage. Below, the humans cheered. Below, the orbital city thrummed with life, technology, and ingenuity. And above, a girl and a dragon rose into the sky together, proof that humanity's spirit, brave, clever, compassionate, could overcome any challenge. Lyra pressed her cheek against the hatchling's warm scales. "We did it," she whispered. "Not just survived. Not just escaped. But changed the world, even if only a little, by refusing to surrender to fear or impossible odds." The hatchling chirped, a joyful sound that echoed through the orbital corridors, and Lyra knew this was only the beginning. Humans had faced impossible odds and survived countless storms. Today they had risen again, not just as survivors but as heroes. Against fire, predators, and cosmic uncertainty, courage and intelligence had triumphed. And somewhere deep in her chest, Lyra felt the truth of the human promise. No challenge was too great, no creature too lost, and no odds too impossible when humans refused to quit. Together they soared. And the universe took notice.